IERD. My son's voice cut through the clatter of plates and low chatter, loud enough that the couple at the next table looked up from their wine. Dad, I told you, this table is for our family. Get outside. He didn't even look at me when he said it. Nathan was sta ring at the reservation card in his hand, his thumb pressing into the paper so hard the edge went white. Like I was some panhandler who'd wandered in off the street and was about to make a scene, I stood there in my best jacket. It was khaki, bought on clearance at Macy's 2 winters ago, the collar a little frayed but clean. I'd shaved that morning, used the last of the aftershave my wife Susan used to buy me from the drugstore. She'd been gone 8 years now, but I still kept that bottle on the bathroom shelf. Nathan had called me 3 days ago, said he wanted to take me to dinner, said Mom's anniversary was coming up and he thought we should talk about her. I'd said yes before he even finished the sentence. Nathan, I said, keeping my voice even, you called me. You said we'd talk about your mother. He finally looked at me then, just a flicker, his blue eyes, Susan's eyes, the same shade of summer sky I'd fallen in love with 40 years ago, derooting away almost instantly. Yeah, I know. But Jenny's parents got into town this morning, unexpected. They're coming here straight from the airport. Dad, you know how they are. They're particular about things. This restaurant is a big deal for them. Particular. They're from Philadelphia, he said, as if that explained everything. They're used to nice places. You sitting here, it's just going to be Aquay Road. I need to talk to them about the Chicago move, about the new job. It's important. Can't you just wait outside? I told you, I'll come out in an hour, we'll go to the coffee shop across the street. We can talk all you want then. His wife Jenny was sitting at the table, her back to me, one hand draped over the back of the empty chair next to her. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse with a gold necklace that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. She hadn't turned around once since I walked in. She was scrolling through her phone, her thumb swiping without pause. Your family, I repeated. The word sat in my mouth like something I'd swallowed wrong. The table was a round 6-seater. 3 chairs were empty, waiting for Jenny's parents. Nathan had his hand on the back of one of them, like he was riding it. I was standing beside the fourth, the one closest to the window, and he hadn't even offered me that one. He was telling me to get out of the building entirely. I looked around the room without moving my head much. I'd been a mail sorter for 37 years, a supervisor for the last 12 of them, and I'd learned to read a room without making it obvious. The couple next to us was sta ring openly now, the woman with her fork frozen halfway to her mouth, the man smirking into his napkin. A few tables over, an old guy in suspenders caught my eye and immediately looked down at his plate, like he'd been caught doing something shameful. The hostess at the front podium was pretending to study the reservation book, but I saw her sneaking glances over the top. They all saw it. An old man being told to leave by his own son. A worn-out khaki jacket that didn't belong in a place with white tablecloths and appetizers that cost $30 each. Nathan, I said, and I let my voice drop low, the way I used to when he was a teenager and I'd caught him sneaking out the bedroom window. That voice had once made him freeze with one leg over the sill. I drove 40 minutes to get here. I parked in a garage that costs $15 an hour. You asked me to come. You didn't mention Jenny's parents on the phone. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe. Or just irritation that I wasn't making this easy. I didn't know they were coming, Dad. Jenny's mom called yesterday. It was last minute. Look, I'm sorry, okay? But they're here now, and this is the one dinner I need to go right. If they see you here, if they think I'm dragging if they get the wrong impression, it's going to mess everything up. Wrong impression, I said. You know what I mean. He ran a hand through his hair, the way he'd done since he was a kid, a nervous habit he never grew out of. They're old money, okay? Her father is a partner at a law firm. They've got expectations. I've worked my whole career to get to where I am, and this job in Chicago could be it, Dad. It could be everything. I can't have any distractions. Distractions. I was a distraction. Jenny finally turned in her seat, just enough to glance at me over her shoulder. She didn't smile. Her eyes scanned me from the worn jacket down to the comfortable shoes I'd worn because I thought we might walk along the river after dinner. The corners of her mouth pulled down. "Nathan, my dad just texted. They're 10 minutes out. He wants to know if they've got the wine list ready." That was it. Not a word to me. Not a hello, not a nice to see you, Tom. She treated me like I was a piece of furniture that had been delivered to the wrong table. Nathan turned back to me, urgency flooding his expression. "Dad. Please. Just go outside. I'll make it up to you. We can have coffee, I'll get you a nice slice of pie from the bakery, whatever you want. I just need you to give me this one night." I looked at the table again. The 3 empty chairs. The white cloth. The water glasses already filled, one for each of them. The napkins folded into fans. Everything perfect, everything arranged. And me, the old man in the worn jacket, being told to get out. "Nathan," I said, and I felt something inside me click into place. Something old and heavy, something I'd ride for decades without ever using. "I'm your father." His eyes met mine for 1 second too long. Something flickered there, not guilt anymore, but something righter. Annoyance. Maybe even anger. "Dad," he said, and his voice got quieter in that way it did when he was about to say something he knew he shouldn't. "I know you are. But you're not part of this. This is my family now. My wife, her parents, my rear. You're on the outside. I'm sorry, but that's how it is." There it was. He said it out loud, in the middle of a restaurant with 24 strangers watching. My own son told me I was on the outside of his life. I felt the weight in my chest shift. Not heavier. Just settling, like a stone that's been rolling downhill and finally finds its hollow. "Okay," I said. He blinked, surprised I wasn't fighting. "Okay? Okay." I reached for the back of the chair I hadn't even been offered and pushed it an inch toward the table, so it wouldn't be sticking out. "You want me outside? I'll go outside." His face softened with relief. It was like watching a storm cloud break. He even reached out and touched my arm, quick and light, the way you'd pat a dog that's finally stopped barking. "Thanks, Dad. I owe you one. I really do. I'll text you in an hour and we'll figure out where to meet." I turned an route walking toward the front door of the restaurant. The floor was repeated in a dark burgundy pattern that absorbed sound, so my footsteps made no noise. The couple at the next table didn't bother hiding their residential this time. The woman actually tilted her head, watching me pass, and I heard her whisper to her companion, "His dad? I thought he was a church fundraiser." The hostess at the podium had the decency to look away when I approached, busying herself with a stack of menus. I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped out into the Chicago evening. The cold hit me rode October wind off the lake, damp and sharp, cutting right through the thin wool of the jacket. I stood on the sidewalk for a second, letting my eyes adjust to the dimmer streetlight glow. Then I turned and looked back through the glass. I could see Nathan through the window, already walking toward the front podium with a smile on his face. Jenny was standing up, smoothing her blouse, her whole posture shifting into something bright and welcoming. The hostess was leading them back toward the table, and I watched Jenny's parents come through the revolving door, her father in a charcoal suit, her mother in a structured wool coat. Handshakes, kisses on cheeks, laughter. Nathan pulled out a chair for Jenny's mother, helped her settle in. Jenny's father clapped Nathan on the shoulder like they were old buddies. My chair, the one I'd pushed back in, was already covered with Jenny's purse. I stood there in the cold for a long minute, watching them through the glass. It was a perfect picture. A successful young couple, 2 proud in-laws, a glowing future ahead. No old man in a frayed jacket to mess up the composition. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My fingers were stiff from the cold, but I scrolled to a name I hadn't called in a while. The contact just said Lee. It rang twice. Then a voice, gravelly, with a trace of Hong Kong English still clinging to the edges after 40 years in the States. Tommy. I was wondering when you'd call. I watched Nathan lift a wine glass and toast. Lee, I said, send that letter. The one we talked about. There was a pause on the other end. Lee was a CA rifle man, that was why I trusted him with the copy of the file. You sure about that? Once it's out, it's out. I'm sure. What changed your mind? I looked at the window one more time. My son was laughing at something Jenny's father had said, his head thrown back, his free hand resting on his wife's shoulder. He looked happy. He looked like he'd forgotten I ever existed. Nothing changed, I told Lee. It was always going to happen. I just didn't know when. Lee exhaled, a long slow breath. Okay, Tommy. I'll make the call tonight. Give it 3 days, maybe 4. You'll hear something. Lee, I said, before he could hang up. One more thing. Yeah? Run a background check on my son. Clean, thorough. I want to know who he's been cozying up to, what Chicago firm he's trying to impress, and who's pulling the strings. START with Jenny's father. He's a lawyer in Philly, probably got connections up here. I want names. Another pause. Lee didn't ask why. He'd been in the security business long enough to know not to ask questions. You got it. You'll have a file in your inbox by tomorrow night. Thanks. Tommy. His voice got a little softer. You okay? I pulled my collar up against the wind and STA route walking Tawa RD the GA rage. The city lights were coming on, one by one, the buildings glowing like stacks of gold bars against the darkening sky. Behind me, the restaurant hummed with wah-rmth and laughter and the clink of good glasses. I'm fine, Lee. I'm just getting STA route. I hung up and kept walking. The wind was cold, but I didn't feel it anymore. I was too busy remembering that 37 years ago, in a wire hut in Da Nang, I'd put my initials in pencil on the back of a classified document. Just a small marque, a habit from the post office, always logging who handled what. I thought nothing of it at the time. Just another piece of paper, another transmission, another night shift in the heat. That piece of paper had put 6 men in federal prison. All of them connected, all of them comfortable, all of them sure they'd never get caught. I was nobody. I was just the mail clerk who sealed the envelope. But I kept the copy. I kept it for 37 years, tucked inside a folder in a box in my closet, because something in me knew I might need it someday. Not for the money. Not for the glory. Just for a moment like this, my son had looked at me and seen somebody who didn't belong at his table. I pulled out my phone one more time, scrolled to Nathan's number. I didn't call. I sent a single text, 2 words. Good luck. Then I put the phone back in my pocket and walked into the GA rage, past the rows of shiny cars, and climbed into my old sedan that smelled like coffee and dust and the ghost of my wife's lavender hand cream. I sat behind the wheel for a minute before turning the key. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow, things were going to START moving. The next morning came gray and damp, the kind of Chicago morning that sat on your chest like a wet towel. I woke at 6, same as always, made coffee in the old percolator that had been on my counter since Susan bought it at a GA Rage sale in '89. I drank it black, standing at the kitchen window, watching the GA beige trucks rumble down the alley. My phone buzzed at 7:30. Lee. He didn't even say hello. Tommy. I got STA route last night. Your son's got a lot of moving parts, more than you probably know. I set the coffee down and pulled a chair out from the kitchen table. Tell me. Lee's voice was flat, professional, the voice of a man who'd spent 40 years reading people for a living. Nathan C.A. Reuter. 32. Senior analyst at a mid-tier firm downtown, not bad money, but he's been angling for an upgrade. The Chicago move you mentioned, that's not just a transfer. That's a jump to a fund called Lakeshore Capital. They're boutique, but they've got serious money behind them. He's been courting them for about 8 months. The main contact is a guy named Alan Pierrecoeur. Retired military, served in the Gulf, runs a tight ship. He's got a reputation for being old school about background checks. He doesn't just want a clean credit report. He wants a clean family tree. Family tree, I repeated. Yeah. Lee paused. And here's the part you're not going to like. Jenny's father, the lawyer in Philadelphia, his name is Richard Thorne. He's got a small practice, but he's got big connections. He plays golf with 2 state senators and a retired judge. He's the one who introduced Nathan to Alan Pierrecoeur. Thorne and Pierrecoeur go way back. Pierrecoeur's wife is Thorne's cousin. So Nathan's not just some candidate off the street. He's family adjacent to the guy running the place. I let that sink in. So Richard Thorne vouched for him. Big time. Thorne told Pierrecoeur that Nathan was the best thing since sliced bread. Promised him that Nathan was clean, stable, solid family background. Thorne's been bragging to his golf buddies that his daughter Married a rising star. That's why the EMBA harassment would be so deep if something went wrong. I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold. What else? Lee read his throat. I pulled Nathan's credit history, his mortgage records, his CAR loans. Clean, all on time. But I found something interesting. 3 years ago, he took out a personal loan for $50,000 RS, paid it off in 18 months. That's a lot of money for a guy at his salary level at the time. I dug a little deeper, and I found that the loan was used to pay off a credit card bill that had been accumulating for almost 2 years. My guess? He was living beyond his means, trying to keep up with Jenny's lifestyle. That loan came due right around the time you gave him the down payment for the house. I remembered that. $20,000 RS. I'd written the check without blinking. He'd said it was for the closing costs, that they were short by a few thousand, that he'd pay me back when his bonus came through. I told him not to worry about it. I see, I said. There's more, Lee said. The personal loan was co-signed. I stopped. By who? Richard Thorne. I leaned back in my chair. The kitchen felt very small all of a sudden. Thorne co-signed a loan for his son-in-law. Yep. And that tells me that Thorne is invested in Nathan's success in a deeper way than just being a proud father-in-law. Thorne's got skin in the game. If Nathan falls apart, Thorne looks like a fool. If Nathan gets a bad mark on his background check, Thorne's the one who recommended him. So Thorne has reasons to make sure I stay out of the picture, I said slowly. That explains why Jenny's been so cold, and why Nathan's been pushing me away. It's not just that they're EMBA rast of an old man. It's that I'm a VA variable Thorne can't control. Lee chuckled, a dry sound. You're a VA variable no one can control, Tommy. That's always been your problem. Or your strength, depending on how you look at it. I stood up and walked to the window again. The alley was quiet now, the garbage truck's gone. A squirrel was picking through a torn bag near the dumpster. Lee, that file I told you about, the one from Da Nang. It's still there, right? Still in the archive. I checked yesterday. It's under a restricted access code, but I've got a contact who can pull it within 72 hours if I give the word. What's the play, Tommy? You want me to give the word? I thought about it. I thought about Nathan's face at the restaurant, the way his eyes had flicked away from mine. I thought about Jenny's shoulder, turned to me like I was invisible. I thought about Richard Thorne, sitting in his Philadelphia office, playing golf with senators, co-signing loans and pulling strings. I want you to sit on it for now, I said. Don't send anything official yet. But Lee, I need you to prep the copy. I want a clean scan of the document, clear enough to be printed and read. And I want a summary of what that document means, what it proved, who went to prison, why it matters. Put it all in one packet. Lee was quiet for a moment. You're building a package. I'm building a wall, I said. And I'm going to put it right in the middle of my son's path to Lakeshore Capital. Lee let out a low whistle. Tommy, you realize what you're doing. If you release that document into the wild, especially if you send it to Alan Pierre before his background check is complete, Nathan's career is over at that firm. Not delayed. Over. Thorne's going to be furious. Jenny's going to blame you for everything. I know. And Nathan, Lee. I cut him off, but my voice wasn't how road Nathan told me to get outside of his life. He said I was a part of his family. I'm just giving him what he asked for. If I'm not part of his family, then I don't have to protect his secrets anymore. I said it calm, flat, like I was reading a weather report. But there was a tremor inside me, something that had been building since the moment my son's words hit me in that restaurant. It wasn't anger. It was older than anger. It was recognition. I had spent my whole adult life trying to be small. In the post office, I'd never asked for promotions I deserved. I stayed in the same job, the same route, the same salary bracket, because I told myself it was stable and Susan needed stability. When she got sick, I cashed out my vacation time to pay the hospital bills. When she died, I didn't tell anyone how much I was hurting, because I didn't want to be a burden. I kept my head down, my jacket clean, my mouth shut. My son grew up thinking his father was a nobody. He wasn't wrong to think it, I'd taught him that. But I wasn't that man anymore. I couldn't be that man. Because that man got told to stand outside his own family's table. Lee, I said, send me the packet. I'll decide when to use it. But I want to have it in my hands. 3 days, Lee said. Maybe 4 if the archive clerks are slow. But I'll push. Good. Tommy. Lee's voice softened, just a little. I've known you since we were both kids in that transport boat, green and SCA red out of our minds. You never asked for anything from anyone. You were always the one who'd give up his seat, give up his ration, give up his chance. I've been waiting 40 years to see you take something for yourself. I almost laughed. This isn't for me. It's not about the old money. It's about the old man. That's different. I hung up and made myself another cup of coffee. This time I drank it while it was still hot. The day passed slow. I walked to the drugstore and bought a new pack of razors. I walked to the library and returned a book that was 3 days overdue. I sat on a bench in the park and watched a mother push a stroller past the fountain, her toddler's feet kicking at the air. I thought about Susan. She would have hated what happened at the restaurant. She would have hated Nathan's words. But she would have understood why I didn't fight. Susan had known me better than anyone. She knew what I kept hidden in the back of the closet. Not the file, she never knew about the file, but the part of me that could have been something else. The part of me that had seen things in the war, done things, held secrets that should never have been mine to hold. She used to tell me, late at night, when we were both too tired to sleep, that I had a strength I never used. You're like a safe, she'd say, her voice soft in the dark, all that metal. All that weight. Just sitting there. You open up for nobody. I'd laughed and told her she was romanticizing a mailman. But she wasn't wrong. I got home around 4. There was a message on my landline, the old machine blinking red. I pressed play and heard Nathan's voice, tinny and compressed. Dad. It's Nathan. Listen, I wanted to call and say sorry about yesterday. I was out of line. Jenny said I was a jerk, and she was right. So, I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you. Maybe dinner this weekend, just you and me. I'll call later, okay? Bye. The machine clicked off. I stood in the kitchen, sta ring at the blinking light. He'd called. He'd apologized. That was something. But I noticed he didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I'd eaten dinner. He didn't ask if I was okay after being publicly humiliated. It was a little sorry, just enough to clean his conscience. A band-aid on a broken arm. I didn't call him back. That night, I sat at my desk and opened the old Sierra Boe Road box I'd kept in the closet for decades. Inside were letters, tax forms, old photographs. Susan's recipe cards. A lock of hair from Nathan's first haircut. And at the bottom, under a stack of birthday cards, a manila folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed and creased along the fold lines. It was the copy I'd made in Da Nang. The pencil signature was still there, faded but legible. T.C.A. Reuter. And next to it, in red ink, the handwriting of a long-dead lieutenant colonel. This man is reliable. I read the whole document by lamplight, slowly, letting the old words sink in. Names I hadn't thought about in decades. Codes and dates that didn't mean anything to anyone except the half-dozen people who'd been there. But the meaning was clear, even after all this time. This piece of paper had sent men to federal prison. It had broken a network of smugglers. It had been used to prove that a chain of command had been corrupted from the inside. And I had held it. I had passed it up the line. I had done the job, sealed the envelope, and never told a soul. The next morning, I woke up and found a message from Lee on my phone. Just a photograph of a document, taken from a computer screen. The cover sheet of a classified file with a reference number stamped in the corner. Below it, Lee had typed, "Got the scan. Packet ready. Say the word." ISTA read at the screen for a long time. The coffee was making steam against the cold kitchen air. Outside, the city was waking up, traffic building, the rumble of the morning commute. Somewhere in a high-rise office, my son was probably walking in with a coffee in one hand and a smile on his face, ready to impress the partners, ready to climb the ladder. He didn't know I'd already climbed that ladder once. I just never told anyone. I typed back 3 words, "Not yet. Soon." Then I put the phone down and went to the bathroom to shave. The call came 3 days later, on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of wiping down my kitchen counters when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Chicago array code. I let it ring twice, then picked up. Mr. C.A. Reuter. The voice was polished, mid-50s, the kind of voice that had spent decades in boardrooms. "This is Alan Pierrecoeur. I'm calling from Lakeshore Capital. I believe you've been expecting to hear from me." I set the dish rag down and pulled out a chair. "Mr. Pierrecoeur. I appreciate you reaching out. I received an interesting document today," he said. There was no hostility in his tone, just full neutrality. "A file copy from the Defense Department Archives, 4-way ride through a third-party. It references a classified transmission from the Vietnam era, with your name attached as the handling officer. I'm told you were the one who authorized the document's release from restricted status." I said. "I'm also told you're in the middle of a background review for a certain candidate." A pause. Pierrecoeur was too seasoned to let his surprise show openly, but I heard the slight hitch in his breathing. "I see. So you're aware of the connection. Mr. Pierrecoeur, the candidate in question is my son." Another pause, longer this time. When Pierrecoeur spoke again, his voice had shifted, shed some of its professional polish. "Your son. Nathan C.A. Reuter. I've been meeting with him for the past 6 weeks. He's been introduced to me by a close associate, and I've been impressed with his credentials. But I have to ask, why are you sending this to me now? Why not mention this relationship earlier? Your son's application lists his parents' occupations. It says you're a retired postal worker." "I am a retired postal worker," I said. "I'm also a man who handled classified materials during the Vietnam War. I kept my mouth shut about it for 37 years, because that's what I was told to do. But I've come to realize that silence isn't always the right choice." Pierrecoeur didn't respond right away. I heard the rustle of paper on his end, like he was flipping through the file. "This document," he said slowly, "is a record of an intercepted transmission that was used to convict several individuals on charges of trafficking military resupplies to enemy forces. Its marquette is sensitive but not classified at the highest level. What I'm reading here is that you were responsible for the chain of custody verification. You initialed the document, confirmed its authenticity, and 4-way rided it to the proper authorities. That's a significant responsibility for a young man in a wartime theater. At the time, I didn't think of it as significant, I told him. I was just a clerk. I did what I was supposed to do. But you kept a copy. I kept a copy because my commanding officer told me to. That was a lie. Lieutenant Colonel Holman had never told me to keep anything. But I needed Pierre to see this as standard RD procedure, not as personal scheming. He said to hold on to a reference copy in case the case was ever revisited. I put it in a box and forgot about it until a few years ago. Pierre made a thoughtful sound. And now you're sending it to me, right when your son is applying for a senior position. I want to be honest with you, Mr. Reuter. This isn't a red flag. It's not a crime, and it's not even unusual for someone of your generation to have served in a capacity that involved sensitive materials. But it is a complication. My firm has military contracts. We work with government agencies that require strict vetting of all partners and employees. A candidate whose father has a documented history of handling classified wartime communications requires us to file additional disclosure forms, request special exemptions, and justify the hire to our compliance team. I let that sink in. So you're saying it creates paperwork? I'm saying it creates delays. His voice got a little sharper. And delays in our industry cost money. The more paperwork we have to file, the more attention the hire draws from our oversight Boa Road. That attention can be inconvenient. It can be enough to make a candidate less attractive than another candidate who doesn't come with those requirements. I leaned four-way RD in my chair. Mr. Pierre, I'm not trying to sabotage my son's chances. I'm trying to make sure you know the full picture before you make a decision. If you hire Nathan and then find out later about my file, you'll have to backtrack, refile, explain to your oversight Boa RD why you missed this detail. I'm giving you the information now, at the front end, so you can decide if you want to take that on. Silence on the line. I could picture Pierre sitting in his office, maybe looking out at the Chicago skyline, weighing the angles. You're protecting yourself, he said finally. You're making sure you don't get blamed for a hidden complication. I'm making sure nobody can say I kept a secret that hurt their company. Another long pause. Then Pierre laughed, a short, dry sound. Mr. Reuter, you're a more complicated man than your son led me to believe. I've met Nathan 3 times. He mentioned his mother, he mentioned his upbringing, he mentioned that his father was a hard-working man with a modest pension. He didn't mention Vietnam. He didn't mention classified materials. He didn't mention that you were sitting on a piece of history. He doesn't know about it, I said. I never told him. Because he never asked, because it was never relevant. I paused, then added, until now. Pierre went quiet again. I could hear him breathing, steady and slow, like he was thinking his way through a chess problem. I have to ask you a direct question, Mr. Reuter. Are you doing this to punish your son? Is there something between you that I should know about? The question hit harder than I'd expected. I looked around my small kitchen, at the yellowed clock on the wall, at the stack of mail on the counter that I hadn't opened yet. I thought about Nathan's face in the restaurant, the way he'd looked at me like I was a stranger. I thought about Jenny's shoulder, pointedly turned away. There was an incident, I said. A family dinner. I was asked to leave the table because I was an EMBA harassment in front of the in-laws. I'm not punishing my son, Mr. Pierre. I'm just not hiding anymore. Pierre absorbed that. I understand, he said, and I believed he did. He was a military man. He knew what it meant to be told you didn't belong somewhere you'd reneged your placed. Here's what I'm going to do, he continued. I'm going to four-way RD this document to our compliance department. They'll evaluate the level of disclosure required, and they'll add a note to Nathan's file. This will trigger a review, which will probably take 2 to 3 weeks. During that time, we'll continue our other interviews. Nathan will still be in consideration, but he won't be the only candidate. And I'll be having a conversation with Richard Thorne about why this information wasn't offered earlier. Thorne doesn't know either, I said. My son's father-in-law. He's not aware of my service record. That's a problem, Pierre said flatly. Richard Road vouched for Nathan's background. He told me the family was clean, stable, no complications. If he didn't know about you, he vouched for something he didn't verify. That's not a small thing in my world. I let that sit. I didn't apologize for it. I hadn't caused the problem, I'd just uncovered it. Mr. Pierre, I said, I appreciate your honesty. I hope you appreciate mine. He made a sound that might have been approval. I do. And I'll be honest with you too, you've made my job harder today, but you've also made it more accurate. That counts for something. I'll be in touch. The line went dead. I sat with the phone in my hand for a minute, letting my pulse settle. Then I called Lee. It's done, I said. Pierre has the file. He's putting it through compliance review. Lee let out a low whistle. That's going to Ripple, Tommy. I've done work for Pierre before, he's thorough, and he's got no patience for people who try to fudge their backgrounds. Once he starts digging, he's not going to stop at the file you sent. He'll pull tax records, marriage certificates, maybe even interview old colleagues. Let him, I said. Everything I did was legal. Everything I kept quiet was by order. The only people who have something to worry about are the ones who lied. Your son didn't lie, Lee said ruefully. He just didn't know. He didn't know because he never read to know. His mother died, and he didn't ask me a single question about her last week. He saw me twice a year for the past 5 years, and never once asked what I did in the war. He called me for money, for child care, for a signature on a form. He didn't call me for me. Lee was quiet. I knew he understood. He had his own family troubles, a son who'd moved to California and stopped returning calls. Lee didn't push. Tommy, what are you going to do next? I stood up and walked to the window. The afternoon was fading into early dusk, the city lights rooting to blink on. Somewhere in one of those tall glass buildings, my son was probably finishing his workday, maybe preparing for a dinner meeting, maybe talking to Jenny about the next step in his career. He didn't know his world was about to tilt. I'm going to wait, I said. Let the process work. And when Nathan figures out what happened, I'm going to be ready to talk to him. Not to fight. Just to talk. You think he'll take that? Well, I thought about it. Thought about Nathan's temper, his pride, his desperate need to seem successful. He would explode when he found out. He would blame me. He would rage and shout and maybe even stop speaking to me. But that was the thing about rage, it burned out. And once it did, the truth would still be there. I hadn't lied. I hadn't attacked. I'd just opened a door that was always supposed to be open. He'll take it like a man, or he won't, I said. But I'll live either way. Lee laughed, a real laugh this time. That's the Tommy I remember. Rode as nails under the soft shell. I didn't correct him. I was softer than I used to be. That came with age, with loss, with watching your wife fade away in a hospital bed. But I still had the iron power. I'd just never used it in a very long time. I hung up with Lee and went to the kitchen to warm up a can of soup for dinner. Later that night, around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text. Nathan. Hey Dad. Busy week. Saw you left a voicemail a few days ago, but I forgot to call back. Everything okay? We're still on for that dinner thing, right? Let me know when works for you. Jenny says hi. I read the text twice. Jenny says hi. That was a lie. She didn't even acknowledge my existence. But Nathan was trying, in his awkward, distracted way, to bridge the gap. He didn't know what was coming. He probably wouldn't be sending casual texts in a few days. I typed back, dinner sounds good. How about Saturday evening? My place. I'll make meatloaf. His reply came fast, okay. Bring Jenny, she wants to come. Sure. I put the phone down. The kitchen was dark except for the light over the sink. I stood there in the quiet, thinking about Saturday. It would be the first time in months that they'd sat down at my table, eaten my food, talked to me like I was more than an afterthought. It would also be the first time they'd sat across from me, wondering what else I'd kept hidden. I turned off the light and went to bed. The next few days were going to be long. Saturday came cold and clear, a sharp winter sun that did nothing to warm the air. I spent the morning at the market, picking out ground beef for the meatloaf, fresh onions, a jar of the good ketchup that Susan used to insist on. I bought a bag of potatoes for mashing and a frozen apple pie for dessert, the kind that came in a tin and tasted fine enough if you didn't overthink it. I cleaned the apartment the way I used to clean before Susan's family came over, dusting the shelves, wiping down the gazebo ards, straightening the stack of newspapers by the armchair. I even put fresh flowers in a vase on the kitchen table, cheap daisies from the grocery store. It wasn't much, but it was honest. They arrived at 6, right on time. I heard the footsteps in the hallway, the muffled voices, and then the knock. I opened the door and there they were, Nathan in a dark sweater that probably cost more than my weekly groceries, Jenny in a PRL-colored coat with her hair pinned back, and between them, their daughter Lily, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one missing ear. Dad, Nathan said, and he leaned in to give me a quick, one-armed hug. It was stiff, but it was something. Good to see you. Sorry we're late. Traffic was a mess. You're not late, I said. You're right on time. Jenny offered me a thin smile. Tom. Thanks for having us. Lily's been talking about seeing you all week. I looked down at my granddaughter. She was 2.5, with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. She read up at me for a moment, her mouth puckered, and then she held up her rabbit. Bunny wants meatloaf. I laughed. Bunny's in luck. I made plenty. They came inside, shedding coats and revs, filling my small living room with the sounds of shuffling feet and rustling fabric. Lily made a beeline for the coffee table, where I'd set out a coloring book and a fresh pack of crayons. Nathan stood by the window, looking out at the alley, his hands in his pockets. Nice place, Dad. You keep it clean. Not much else to do, I said. Sit down, both of you. Dinner's almost ready. I went back into the kitchen to check on the meatloaf. Through the doorway, I could see them settling in, Jenny on the couch, scrolling through her phone, Nathan hovering by the bookshelf, scanning the titles like he was evaluating my taste. I felt a tightness in my chest, but not the bad kind. The kind that came from wanting something to go right. We ate at the kitchen table, the four of us crowded around the small surface. Lily sat in a booster seat I'd bought years ago for Nathan, worn plastic with a faded cartoon duck on the side. She mashed her potatoes with her fork and fed tiny pieces to her rabbit. Nathan ate quietly, complimenting the meatloaf, asking about my week. Jenny asked about my health, my blood pressure, whether I'd seen the doctor lately. It was all surface talk, refill and polite, like we were colleagues at an office lunch. Then Nathan set his fork down and looked at me. Dad, I wanted to tell you something. Things are moving four-way RD with Lakeshore. I had a meeting with Alan Royer this week, and he said they're close to a decision. They're doing some additional checks, some paperwork stuff, but he said I'm still in the running. I took a bite of potato and chewed slowly. That's good news. Yeah. Nathan smiled, but there was something tight in his jaw. It's been a long process, but I think it's going to pay off. Jenny's dad has been really helpful, making calls, smoothing things over. You know how it is in this business, sometimes it's not what you know, it's who. I nodded. Who you know matters. Exactly. Nathan leaned back in his chair, warming to the subject. And this is the big one, Dad. If I get this job, we're moving to Chicago, buying a house in the suburbs, the whole thing. Jenny can go back to work part-time if she wants, Lily will have a good school district. It's everything we've been working for. Jenny reached over and squeezed his hand. We're excited. It's been a long road. I looked at my son, at the flush of pride in his cheeks, and I felt something twist in my stomach. He was so sure. So confident that the path was clear, that he had all the pieces in place. He didn't know that the man he was trying to impress had already seen a document that could tilt everything. "Nathan," I said, "when you talked to Mr. Pierre, did he mention anything unusual? Any questions that stood out?" Nathan frowned. "Unusual? No. He asked about my work history, my education, the usual stuff." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," I said. "I've heard that companies like his do deep background checks. They dig into family history sometimes." Nathan waved a hand dismissively. "That's just for the really high-level security stuff. I'm not applying for the CIA, Dad. It's a financial firm. They want to make sure I'm not a criminal or a deadbeat. That's all." I didn't press. I could feel Jenny's eyes on me, sharp and assessing, like she sensed something beneath the surface of the conversation. Lily finished her potatoes and sta root, banging her spoon against the table. Jenny scped her up and ride her to the living room to calm her down. Nathan and I were alone at the table. He read his throat. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Were you ever in the military? I mean, like, really in it?" "You never talked about it much when I was a kid. Just mentioned that you'd been overseas for a few years before you met Mom. But I realized I don't actually know what you did." I looked at him. Really looked. He was 32, a grown man with a child of his own, and he was asking me for the first time about a part of my life that had shaped everything about who I was. I could have told him then. I could have laid it all out: the signals HUD and Danang, the classified documents, the initials on the back of the file. I could have explained that his father wasn't just a mailman, that I'd done things, held things, that my life had been more complicated than he'd ever imagined. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready, and more importantly, he wasn't ready. The news wasn't something you dropped over meatloaf on a Saturday night. "I was a clerk," I said. "Handled communications. Nothing exciting. I spent most of my time filing papers and sorting mail, same as I did back home." Nathan nodded, satisfied. "That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. You know how these things go, sometimes people have gaps in their history, and you never know. But you're clean, right? No surprises." "No surprises," I said. He smiled, relieved, and stood up to take his plate to the sink. I watched him move around my kitchen, opening the wrong cabinet to look for the trash can, rinsing his fork in the sink the way I'd taught him when he was 10. He didn't know. He honestly had no idea. After dinner, we sat in the living room. Jenny fed Lily a bottle while Nathan scrolled through his phone, checking work emails. The TV was on, some old movie neither of them read about. It was ordinary, almost cozy. For a few minutes, I let myself pretend that this was how it always was, that my son and his family came over regularly, that we were connected by more than obligation. Then Nathan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his face changed. "Dad, I need to take this," he said, standing abruptly. "It's work." He walked into the hallway outside my apartment door, closing it behind him. I could hear his muffled voice through the thin wood, but not the words. Jenny kept her eyes on the TV, bouncing Lily gently on her knee. A few minutes later, Nathan came back in. His face was pale, his jaw tight. Jenny looked up and immediately tensed. "What happened?" Nathan didn't answer her. He looked at me. "Dad, I just got a call from Alan Pierre's assistant. They're pushing back my interview timeline. They said they need to do additional family vetting and that there's been some new information that requires review." I felt my pulse in my throat, but I kept my face still. "New information, yeah." His voice was strained. "They wouldn't tell me what it was. Just that it came from an outside source and needed to be confirmed before they could move forward. They said it was about a family member's background." "Dad, do you know anything about this?" Jenny read at me, her eyes now rolling. "Tom, is there something you haven't told us?" I looked at them both. My son, read and confused. My daughter-in-law, suspicious and hostile. My granddaughter, oblivious in her mother's arms. "I don't know what they found," I said ruefully. "But if there's information out there, it probably comes from a long time ago. Before you were born, Nathan." Things I never talked about because I was told not to. What things? Nathan's voice was rising. Dad, you said there were no surprises. You said you were just a clerk. What are you not telling me? I took a breath. The moment I'd been waiting for was here, and it felt bigger and heavier than I'd expected. Nathan, I said, I served in Vietnam. I handled communications. And some of what I handled was classified. I kept my mouth shut about it for 40 years because that's what I was ordered to do. But the file is still out there, and if Lakeshore found it, then they know more about me than I ever told you. He read at me, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and finally anger. You're telling me you had a classified file and you never told me? You let me walk into interviews without knowing this? You never asked, I said. You never wanted to know. You wanted a father who fit into your neat little story. Well, I'm more than that, Nathan. I always was. The room went silent. Jenny set Lily down on the floor and crossed her arms. Nathan stood in the middle of the room, breathing hard. This isn't happening, he said. This isn't fair. I'm supposed to be getting my dream job, and you've been sitting on a secret that could wreck it. I didn't wreck anything, I said. I just stopped hiding. The words hung in the air, RP and final. Nathan read at me for a long moment, then turned and walked to the door. He grabbed his coat and yanked it on. Jenny, we're leaving. She didn't argue. She picked up Lily, gathered her purse, and followed him out. The door closed behind them, and I heard their footsteps retreating down the hallway. I sat in the quiet living room, surrounded by half-empty glasses and a coloring book left open on the floor. The meatloaf was still warm in the kitchen, but no one would be eating more of it. I picked up Lily's abandoned rabbit from the couch and held it in my hands. Small, worn, a missing EAR. I bought it for her last Christmas, and she'd ride it everywhere since. I set it on the coffee table and leaned back in my chair. The storm had arrived. Now I just had to wait it out. I didn't hear from Nathan for a week. That was fine. I knew he needed to boil over before he could settle. I'd seen that pattern 100 times in the post office. A guy gets bad news, spends a few days shouting at the walls, and then comes back with his hat in his hands, ready to listen. What I didn't expect was the knock on my door at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. I opened it and found Jenny standing in the hallway, alone. No Nathan, no Lily. She was wearing a plain gray coat and no makeup, and she looked like she hadn't slept much. Tom, she said. Can I come in? I stepped aside and let her pass. She walked into the living room, stood in the middle of the rug, and turned to face me. I closed the door and waited. Nathan doesn't know I'm here, she said. He's at work. He's been at work every day for the past week, staying late, coming home after I'm asleep. He's not handling this well. I motioned for her to sit. She hesitated, then lowered herself onto the edge of the couch, her hands clasped between her knees. I didn't come here to yell at you, she said. I came because I need to understand. Nathan won't talk to me. He just shuts down and says it's all your fault, and I don't know what to believe anymore. I sat across from her in the armchair. The apartment was quiet, just the hum of the old radiator. Jenny, I said, what do you want to know? She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than the distant daughter-in-law I'd always known. She looked tired. She looked red. Tell me the truth about what you did in Vietnam. The whole thing. Nathan said you were just a clerk, but Alan Pierre's people found something that made them stop the whole process. My father called me yesterday. He was furious. He said Nathan had been caught in some kind of family scandal, and that his reputation was on the line. He didn't even know what the scandal was. He just blamed me for marrying into it. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. There's no scandal. There never was. I handled a classified document in 1969 that helped convict some people who were trafficking supplies to the North Vietnamese. I initialed the document, passed it up the chain, and went back to my regular duties. That's all. There's nothing illegal. There's nothing dirty. It's just that the document exists, and it has my name on it. Jenny read at me. That's what's causing all this, that's it. Alan Pierre's compliance team probably flagged it because the document is still technically restricted. They have to do extra work to clear me before they can clear Nathan. It's a bureaucratic problem, not a moral one. She shook her head slowly. My father said you were hiding something. He said people who hide things have reasons to hide them. People hide things for a lot of reasons, I said. Sometimes it's because they're ashamed. Sometimes it's because they were ordered to. Sometimes it's because nobody ever asked the right question. Jenny was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Nathan doesn't know how to fix this. He's been calling Alan Pierre every day, leaving messages, trying to explain. Pierre won't take his calls anymore. He just gets the assistant, who says the review is ongoing. Nathan's terrified he's going to lose this job, and he doesn't know how to fight back. Pierre's not going to take his calls, I said. He's a former military man. He doesn't want to be pressured. He'll make his decision when he's done his due diligence. But what if he decides against Nathan, then Nathan doesn't get the job? That's always been a possibility. It was a possibility before I sent that document. The difference is that now, if he doesn't get it, he'll know why. He won't be blindsided by something that comes out later. Jenny pressed her palms against her knees. Her hands were shaking. I never wanted to be in the middle of this. Nathan and we have a good life. We built it fully. We made choices, we made compromises. I pushed him to be ambitious, to aim high. My father pushed him too. We all thought we were helping him get what he deserved. And now it's all falling apart because of something that happened before I was even born. I looked at her. For all her coldness, for all her dismissiveness over the RS, I saw something in her that I recognized. She was red of losing the life she'd built. She'd married into a family that was supposed to be stable, respectable, upway RD moving. She hadn't signed up for a father-in-law with classified secrets and a dead wife and a kitchen table that only sat 4 people. Jenny, I said, I'm not trying to tear your family apart. I'm not trying to take anything away from Nathan or from Lily. I'm just trying to be myself. I spent 40 years being the man everyone expected me to be. I was quiet. I was humble. I never made trouble. And that got me a seat at my son's table, right up until he told me to get outside. She flinched. Nathan told me about that. He said he was out of line. He was. But he's not the only one. You didn't say anything either. You let him treat me like a stranger, and you didn't stop him. She lowered her eyes. I was trying to keep the peace. The peace has been broken anyway. The question is whether we build something new out of the pieces. Jenny sat with that for a while. The radiator clicked and hummed. Through the window, the morning light was thin and gray, the sky choked with clouds. Tom, she said finally, I didn't come here just for answers. I came because I need you to do something. What? Talk to Nathan. Not fight, not explain, just talk. He won't listen to me right now because he's too angry. He won't listen to my father because my father only ca residential about appearances. But he might listen to you. You're the one who root this. You might be the only one who can stop it. I looked at her for a long moment. This was the first time she'd ever asked me for anything that wasn't tied to money or childcare. I'll talk to him, I said. But you have to promise me something first. She waited. After this is over, whether he gets the job or not, you and Nathan and Lily come to my place once a month for dinner. Not because it's convenient. Not because you need something. Because I'm family. And I'm not going to be a secret anymore. She hesitated. Then she nodded. I can do that. I walked her to the door. She paused on the threshold, her hand on the frame. Tom, one more thing. Yes, thank you. For not lying to me. I've had enough lies to last a lifetime. She left. I closed the door and leaned against it, letting the quiet settle around me. I called Nathan's office that afternoon. His assistant put me through, which surprised me. Maybe he told her to let his father through. Maybe he was just tired of dodging. His voice came on the line, clipped and cold. Dad. Nathan. I'm not going to talk about the file. I'm not going to talk about Pierre or Lakeshore. I just want to ask you one thing. What have you ever looked at your life and thought about what you actually want, separate from what Jenny wants, or what her father wants, or what the partners at the firm expect? Silence on his end. I could picture him sitting in his office, probably surrounded by files and screens, probably wearing that Sharp suit with the cufflinks. What kind of question is that, he said finally, the kind you're not used to answering. But think about it. When you were a kid, you wanted to be a baseball player. You wanted to stay up late and read comic books. You wanted to build a treehouse in the back of a road. You never wanted to be a corporate analyst. You fell into it because it paid well and your girlfriend's father had connections. Nathan laughed, but it was hollow. You're going to lecture me about my career choices? You, who spent 40 years in a mailroom? I spent 40 years providing for a family, I said. I didn't love every minute of it, but I did it because I had people who depended on me. I was never in it for the prestige. I was in it for the stability. That's all I ever wanted for you, stability. Not status. Not a corner office. Not a paycheck that impresses your in-laws. I don't need you to tell me what I want, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. I'm 32 years old. I have a wife and a child. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because right now, you're watching your dream job slip away because of a piece of paper from a war that ended before you were born. And you're blaming me for it. But that piece of paper was always there. The only thing that changed is that now you know about it. And maybe that's a good thing. Good, he almost shouted. How is this good? Because now you know who your father really is. Now you know that I'm not just a retired postal worker. Now you know that I've ride secrets my whole life, and I've never let them define me. I didn't tell you about Vietnam because I didn't want you to feel obligated to a legacy. I wanted you to build your own. The line went quiet. I could hear him breathing, slow and ragged. Dad, he said, and his voice cracked. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make Pierre see me the same way he saw me before. I don't know how to make Jenny's father stop looking at me like I'm damaged goods. I don't know how to be the man everyone expects me to be. I closed my eyes. My son was hurting. My son was lost. And for all the anger I'd ride, all the RS of being overlooked, I couldn't stand to hear him break. Nathan, I said, you don't need to fix anything. You just need to wait. Pierre will finish his review. He'll make his decision. And if he says no, you'll find another job. You're smart. You're hard-working. You'll land somewhere else. But you won't land anywhere if you keep blaming me for the past. The past is done. All we've got is now. He didn't respond for a long time. I thought maybe he'd hung up. Then he spoke, quiet and raw. Okay, Dad. Okay. Saturday, I said. Come by the apartment. Just you. We'll have dinner and talk. No Jenny. No Lily. Just us. Okay. I hung up and sat in the quiet kitchen. The afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, spilling gold across the worn linoleum floor. I looked at the old wall clock Susan had hung decades ago, its hands still turning, still measuring time. I'd spent so many years measuring time in silence. Waiting for my son to see me. Waiting for my wife to get better. Waiting for a moment that never came. Now I was done waiting.